During World War II, there was a gardening method so efficient that families planted once and harvested for years without weeding, tilling, or replanting. No daily maintenance, no constant labor, no backbreaking work that kept people tied to gardens when labor was needed elsewhere. These lazy gardens produced more food per square foot than conventional plots being worked daily. They required 90% less water. They eliminated weeds almost completely, and they improved annually without any inputs or amendments. The method wasn't new. It was ancient technique refined under wartime necessity. But it worked so well that agricultural extension offices taught it as standard practice during food shortages. Then the war ended. Within a decade, the lazy garden method vanished from every agricultural guide, every farming manual, every gardening publication in America, not because it stopped working, because it threatened industries that profit from making gardening seem like hard work requiring constant purchases. Today, garden centers don't want you knowing this method exists, because if people realize that properly designed gardens maintain themselves, that nature does the work when you stop fighting it, and that food production doesn't require the products they're selling, entire sectors would collapse. But the knowledge survived. And the method still works exactly as it did 80 years ago. Number one, the no-dig foundation. Traditional gardening requires tilling, breaking up soil, mixing in amendments, destroying soil structure and killing beneficial organisms every season, then rebuilding everything from scratch. The cycle repeats endlessly, requiring constant labor and degrading soil quality over time. The lazy garden eliminated tilling completely. Soil was never disturbed after initial setup. This preserved soil structure, protected beneficial organisms, and allowed natural processes to improve growing conditions continuously. The foundation started with cardboard or thick newspaper layers covering existing ground. Weeds, grass, whatever grew, there was simply covered, not removed. The paper blocked light, killing existing vegetation while creating a barrier that would decompose into organic matter. On top of the paper, organic materials were layered. Finished compost, aged manure, leaf mold, whatever was available. This layer, 6 to 12 inches deep, became the permanent growing medium. Seeds and transplants went directly into this material. As plants grew, their roots penetrated downward through the decomposing paper into the soil below. But the paper prevented weed seeds in that soil from reaching surface light. Weeds that would have required constant removal never germinated. The key was never disturbing the layering, and when harvesting root crops, only the specific plant was removed. The surrounding soil stayed intact. When planting new crops, small holes were made for seeds or transplants. No broad cultivation, no turning, no mixing. This undisturbed approach allowed soil biology to establish and mature. Earthworms colonized, beneficial fungi spread, bacteria populations stabilized. Each year, the biological community became more complex and more effective at cycling nutrients and suppressing disease. Traditional gardens destroyed this biology annually through tilling. The lazy garden cultivated it through benign neglect, and productivity increased as biology matured. Number 2, the permanent mulch system. Bare soil is an emergency in nature. When soil becomes exposed, systems activate to cover it immediately. Weeds are nature's emergency response team. They colonize bare ground fast, protecting soil until slower permanent plants can establish. Traditional gardens fight this constantly. Bare soil between crops invites weeds. Gardeners spend hours pulling, hoeing, and cultivating to maintain the bare ground agriculture demands. The lazy garden eliminated bare soil permanently. Every square inch stayed covered with organic mulch. This suppressed weeds while providing continuous nutrient input as materials decomposed. The mulch layer was maintained at 4 to 6 inches depth constantly. As lower layers decomposed and compressed, new material was added on top. Grass clippings, leaves, straw, plant trimmings, kitchen scraps, anything organic went onto the garden continuously. This constant mulching created multiple benefits simultaneously. Weed suppression was nearly total. The few weeds that did emerge pulled easily from loose mulch without disturbing soil. Water retention increased dramatically. Mulch prevented evaporation, reducing irrigation needs by 70 to 80%. Soil temperature moderated. Mulch kept soil cooler in summer and warmer in winter. But the real magic was nutrient cycling. As mulch decomposed at the bottom of the layer, it released nutrients directly into root zones, no fertilizer needed. The garden fed itself from materials that would have been waste otherwise. Measurements showed nitrogen levels in permanent mulch gardens exceeding fertilized conventional gardens within 3 years. The biological processes converting mulch to available nutrients were more efficient than chemical fertilization. Traditional gardens required seasonal mulching if used at all. The lazy garden used mulch as permanent growing system infrastructure. The difference was understanding that covering soil isn't a seasonal task. It's permanent condition. Number 3, the self-seeding integration. Annual vegetables typically require replanting every season. Seeds purchased, started, transplanted, labor and expense repeated endlessly. but many vegetables will reseed themselves if allowed. The lazy garden exploited this completely. Lettuce was left to bolt. Instead of pulling plants when they turned bitter and went to seed, they were allowed to complete their life cycle. Seeds formed, matured, and dropped directly onto the permanent mulch layer. Weeks later, new lettuce seedlings emerged exactly where the parent plants had grown. This self-seeding eliminated replanting entirely. One initial planting provided lettuce indefinitely. The gardener's only task was harvesting mature plants and allowing a few to seed. Nature handled the rest. The same principle applied across numerous crops. Arugula, cilantro, dill, parsley, spinach, and cooler climates all reseeded readily. Even tomatoes dropped fruit containing hundreds of seeds. In mild climates, volunteer tomatoes emerged the following spring from fruit that had rotted in place. Root vegetables required slight management. Carrots, beets, and turnips needed to be left in ground through winter, in some cases to flower and seed the next year. But once seeding occurred, those crops returned annually with minimal intervention. The key was understanding plant life cycles and working with them instead of against them. Traditional gardening pulled plants at harvest, interrupting natural reproduction. The lazy garden let biology complete, then benefited from the results. Some management remained necessary. Seedlings often emerged too thick and required thinning, but thinning took minutes compared to hours of seed starting and transplanting. And thinned plants went back onto the mulch layer, feeding the system that produced them. Within 3 years, properly managed lazy gardens were 90% self-seeding. The gardener became harvester and occasional manager rather than constant laborer. Number 4, the perennial vegetable core. Most garden vegetables are annuals. They complete their life cycle in one season and die. This creates the endless replanting cycle that makes gardening seem like constant work. But numerous edible plants are perennial. They return yearly without replanting, producing for decades from single installation. The lazy garden centered on perennials. These form the production backbone, providing reliable harvests without any planting labor after establishment. Asparagus was fundamental. One planting produced for 20 to 30 years. Each spring, spears emerged without any input. Harvest lasted 6 to 8 weeks. Then plants were left to grow and store energy for next year. Zero work except cutting spears. Rhubarb functioned identically. Plant once, harvest for decades. The stalks produced heavily in spring. Then the plant maintained itself through summer and fall. No care required. Walking onions, also called Egyptian onions, produced both underground bulbs and top-setting bulblets. As top bulblets matured, they bent the stalk to ground level and rooted, creating new plants. A small patch spread slowly, providing continuous onion harvest without replanting. Perennial kale, also called tree collards, produced leaves year-round in mild climates. Harvesting outer leaves while leaving the growing tip allowed continuous production. The plant lived for years, growing into a substantial shrub that fed families regularly. Sorrel, lovage, horseradish, Jerusalem artichoke, all grew as permanent garden residents producing food annually. Once established, they required only occasional harvesting. Traditional gardens focused on annual crops, requiring yearly planting. This created dependence on seed purchases and constant labor. Lazy garden reversed this. Perennials formed the core, annuals filled gaps. The ratio meant 70% of production required zero replanting. Only 30% needed annual attention. This fundamental shift reduced labor by similar ratios, and productivity increased as perennials matured and established. Number 5, the natural pest balance. Conventional gardens experience boom and bust pest cycles. Aphid populations explode. Gardeners spray pesticides. The pests die, but so do their predators. Next season, aphids return faster than predators, creating worse infestations. The cycle spirals, requiring increasing chemical inputs. The lazy garden eliminated this through permanent habitat that supported predator populations year-round. Undisturbed mulch layers housed ground beetles, spiders, and centipedes that ate pest insects and their eggs. Perennial plants provided nectar and pollen for parasitic wasps and predatory flies throughout the season. The diversity was key. Instead of monoculture rows, lazy gardens mixed crops randomly. Pests, searching for host plants, found scattered individual targets instead of concentrated food sources. Populations stayed low because colonization was difficult. Beneficial insects thrived because habitat was never destroyed. While tilled gardens were biological deserts each spring, requiring beneficials to recolonize from surrounding areas, lazy gardens maintained populations continuously. Predators were already present when pest eggs hatched, preventing infestations before they started. This natural pest control was documented across thousands of wartime gardens. Agricultural officials measured pest damage comparing tilled conventional plots to undisturbed lazy gardens. The lazy gardens showed 60 to 80% less pest damage, despite zero pesticide use. The explanation was ecological stability. Diverse undisturbed systems develop predator-prey balances that prevent any species from dominating. Simple, disturbed systems lack this regulation, leading to pest explosions. Modern gardens till annually, destroying beneficial habitat and creating conditions where pests thrive. Then chemicals are sold to fix the pest problems that the gardening method itself created. The lazy garden avoided this entirely by not creating pest-favorable conditions in the first place, and when problems did occur, the resident predator population usually handled them without intervention. Number 6, the suppression and forgetting. The lazy garden method threatened multiple industries simultaneously. Seed companies lost sales when crops reseeded themselves. Fertilizer manufacturers lost customers when mulch provided nutrients. Pesticide producers lost markets when biological balance prevented infestations. Equipment makers lost buyers when tilling stopped. The suppression was coordinated and systematic. In the late 1940s, agricultural extension offices began teaching mechanical cultivation as modern best practice. Tilling was promoted as scientific and necessary. The no-till approach was labeled old-fashioned. Garden equipment advertising expanded dramatically. Rototillers, cultivators, specialized tools were marketed as essential for proper gardening. The message was consistent. Good gardeners worked hard. Lazy gardening was neglectful and unsuccessful. Seed catalogs shifted toward hybrids and varieties bred for mechanical harvest and transportation rather than flavor or self-seeding ability. Open-pollinated varieties that reseeded readily became difficult to obtain. The industry needed annual seed purchases, so they bred plants requiring annual seed purchases. Chemical companies promoted fertilizers and pesticides as necessary for productive gardens. Extension publications recommended application schedules, amounts, and products. The lazy garden's biological approach was dismissed as insufficient for modern production standards. Within 20 years, the method had been successfully erased from mainstream gardening knowledge. New gardeners learned tilling, annual planting, and chemical inputs as standard practice. The idea that gardens could maintain themselves seemed impossible because nobody taught it anymore. Today, permaculture practitioners and some organic gardeners are rediscovering no-till, permanent mulch, perennial integration. They document the same benefits wartime gardeners achieved. But most still don't know it was standard practice 80 years ago. The knowledge was deliberately suppressed because self-maintaining gardens eliminate recurring purchases. And recurring purchases generate profits. Simple gardens don't. They didn't survive through constant labor. They didn't depend on annual seed purchases or chemical inputs. And they didn't accept that food production required the endless work modern gardening demands. What they had was understanding. Gardens are ecosystems. Ecosystems maintain themselves when designed correctly. Fight nature and work never ends. Cooperate with nature, and nature does the work. For 70 years, the industry has been winning. They convinced people that gardening requires tilling, replanting, and purchasing products. They made food production seem like endless labor requiring special tools and chemicals. But the lazy garden still works. Plant biology hasn't changed. Permanent mulch still suppresses weeds. Perennials still return yearly. Self-seeding still works. Natural pest control still functions. The next time someone tells you gardening requires constant work, remember, wartime families grew more food with less labor than modern gardens produce through endless effort. The method exists now in scattered knowledge. Permaculture teaches pieces. Organic gardening preserves fragments. But complete integration, the full system working together, remains rare because it eliminates too many purchases. If this matters to you, subscribe now. Share with everyone growing food or wanting to start. Because the method that fed millions during crisis still feeds whoever learns it. Two kinds of gardeners exist. Those working constantly to fight nature, and those working briefly to cooperate with it. One stays busy, one stays fed. Hit subscribe. Share everywhere. The lazy garden isn't history. It's freedom from garden industry dependence.